Hi, my name is Michael, and let's talk about Nioh. Nioh is an action RPG that was made by Team Ninja and released in February of 2017. I have some very conflicted feelings about this. Now, in this little discussion, I'm going to be talking about it and comparing it to the Souls games, which some people have suggested is not necessarily fair, but frankly, I think it is fair. They're both action RPGs, and the Souls games, I think, are the gold standard of action RPG. So, of course, we have to compare it to that. Now, I am a Dark Souls addict. I need those games. I love them, and I have an itch to scratch to play things like that. And before I get started, Nioh is a game that will scratch that itch. It is a game that will make you feel that Dark Souls feel. It is fast-paced, dangerous, challenging. It just has a Souls feel, though. I would say that it's about 40% Dark Souls and 60% other stuff. There's a little bit of Diablo in there, there's a lot of Onimusha, a hell of a lot of the movement and playstyle reminded me of the modern Ninja Gaiden games that were released back on the... I played only Ninja Gaiden 2 on the Xbox 360, but it reminded me a heck of a lot of that. But the Souls game comparison still stands, so I'm going to be making it a lot. I was originally going to make this a more structured review, but I decided to speak extemporaneously about all of this and mix in the good with the bad. I was going to divide the good parts into the bad parts, but part of this game is that the good parts impinge so much on the bad and vice versa that it's impossible to tell the story with one column for good and one column for bad. You have to do both of them. I mean, the good of it is that it has a very fast-paced, well-designed, interesting, and fun combat system that will make you feel like you're playing a Souls game. It is rewarding, interesting, fun, and addictive to just move around, to jump around, to dodge enemies. There's iframes to dodge enemy attacks, I believe, and the attacks feel very much, it feels similar to the Souls games. And it's really enjoyable to do that, but there are some issues. First, the combat of the game is, as I said, it's fun and it's Souls-ish. However, it has major issues to it that I really didn't like. One of those issues was the stamina issue. Now, they call stamina key in this one, but I'm just going to call it stamina to keep it standardized with the Souls series. But you have vastly less stamina, it feels, in order to dodge and jump and move around in this game than you did in the Souls games. You are so punished for that if you overstep it. It is crazy. You needed much more stamina than they gave you, and God help you if you wear heavy armor, because in this game, heavy armor doesn't affect your rolls, it just makes your general movement slower, and it costs more to do everything. So if you're wearing that big heavy armor, everything that you do costs more stamina, and that's already when you have very little stamina to start with. Most importantly, when you're attacked or when you attack an enemy, stamina is drained from them along with health, which is very different from the Souls games where you can't lose stamina unless you do something. But in this game, if you get hit, you lose a bit of stamina and vice versa for the enemies. So you have to be very, very careful with your stamina, most especially because of losing all of your stamina. Now in the Souls games, you'll notice that if you lose every little bit of your stamina, guess what happens? You're sort of staggered for a brief moment, but it's very brief, and you can instantly recover from it right after that and start playing again. In this game, they brutally punish you when you run out of stamina. When your stamina is knocked away completely in the red, that means that you can't move. You can't roll, you can't attack, you can't use an item, you can't even move out of the way of an enemy. And this happens all the damn time. It is really obnoxious, especially in boss fights, and yeah, I know you have to be careful with it, but it's just so irritating that you have to watch your stamina so precisely all the time and back away and get your stamina back. It is more punishing and more brutal in the Souls games when it comes to that. It is enraging during boss fights to be doing so good, and then an unexpected enemy attack hits you, knocks away all your stamina, and you're frozen there for a couple of seconds, much longer than you'd be staggered in a Souls game, and you're dead essentially at that point. It's very difficult to recover from that. If you're in a boss fight, it has to be somewhat of a miracle for you to survive that. The stamina issues are continually, brutally frustrating throughout my entire playthrough. This led to controller-breaking rage and frustration so many times because it just felt so unfair. I mean, if I ran out of stamina, that should be it, I just wait for it to come back. And I can move around, at least I can walk away from an enemy that's about to kill me. This killed me so many times in the boss fights. When I was doing good, you have to be so precise and so careful, it's crazy. This stamina thing, I'm going on about it, but it's a giant, giant, giant reason why I got very angry at this game. And it needs to be removed from any subsequent version. It is rage-inducing and horrible, and I despised it. It is so punishing and so brutal, I just want it gone. However, having said that, the fighting system overall, with that aside, is a lot of fun. I did enjoy it. It's much better than in most games. It has more of a Souls feel than a straight-up action game. It can be very, very difficult in a good way. You can choose from a collection of 5 different weapons. The sword, the double swords, the spear, the axe/hammer, and the kusarigama, which is sort of a sickle and chain type weapon that ninjas would use, I think. They're all a lot of fun, especially because you can actually have, for each weapon, they have 3 stances. Now, the stances is something that's been sort of kicked around in the Souls game for a while now, this idea that people maybe would want to have different movesets for different weapons. So even though there are only 5 weapons, you have 3 stances to use them in. So instead of 2 attacks, light and strong, you actually have 6. 2 for low, 2 for medium, and 2 for high. And that is a lot of fun. I originally thought it was going to be too confusing to do this, but it's just a couple of hours of play, maybe at the outset, maybe at the biggest stretch, 8-9 hours of play, you'll get it down to be able to switch between them. However, something odd that the stances do also is that they change your rolling. At the high stance, you just roll heavily. And it's not a roll like Dark Souls. It is difficult. You don't want to do this roll because it just exposes you for too long. Most of the time you don't want to do this, especially in a boss fight. The mid one, you have a Bloodborne type dash, but if you do it twice, you go into a roll. And in almost every occasion, I hated going into that roll because it was an accident and it was dangerous and it was going to get you killed. I prefer just to dash, dash, dash. But which you can do in the low stance, but that dash feels weird. It doesn't look right and feel normal. It just makes it unsafe. So in some ways, I think this was done very well. There are less weapons than in a Souls game, but there's more variety to use them, and a lot of the Souls game weapons were repeats of other weapons anyway, just minor little differences here and there. So the overall types are lower. There could have been a little bit more. That would have been nice. So to sum up the combat, if you like fast-paced action RPGs as I do, it's going to be a lot of fun, but there's a major frustration in it with that obnoxious stamina thing. And I don't even like the thing to do with stamina when you're wearing heavy armor and it takes up more stamina just to attack and move and roll and so forth. That's crazy. So there's a good amount of stuff, again, that 40% of stuff just under the halfway mark of greatness, and some other things that I really didn't like mixed in with it. Speaking of which, the level design. The level design is not like Souls. With the exception of one level that comes at the very end of the game, which has the depth and largeness and complexity of a Souls game, most of them are just these tiny, itsy-bitsy little levels. And I would go through a process of playing them, enjoying them, really liking them, but realizing very quickly how incredibly short each of the levels were. They're small, and they're not really dense and tightly packed with stuff for people or items either. They're just not very satisfying. I would go into a main story mission, and no time would pass at all before I would be fighting the boss. It would just happen so quickly. It's crazy. They really needed to fix these levels and make a smaller number of much bigger levels. That would have worked it out, I think. But in this one, it's just tiny little tidbits of much smaller levels. And once you get to the boss, this is another problem with the game. You have to fight against that boss until you die. There's really nothing you can do about it. You just have to fight, grind away against him until you destroy him. And if you don't want to fight this boss and you don't like this boss, well, too bad. There's nothing you can really do unless you want to quit the level and do everything over again from the beginning. It's really obnoxious, so you just have to bash your head against this boss Whereas in the Souls games, you had the Metroidvania style, where if an area was kicking your ass and you hated it, you could immediately just go somewhere else. Eventually you'd have to come to a choke point where you had to fight XYZ boss, but most of the time you can just wander away and do something else. And that made it really, really enjoyable. In this game, if you're in a level, you're in that level and you have to beat it. There's nothing you can do or say about it. Now, in between the main story missions, there are these little side quests, and they're optional, of course. You can choose to do them. But the levels they choose to do them in are either weird, shortened versions of main levels, or a couple of very standard generated levels in which the side quests tend to take place. So there are just a couple of them, and if you do them habitually, you're going to see them again and again and again. And the levels are already not very good and short, so these shortened versions of them are pretty darn bad. And they get pretty boring. I mean, they can be kind of interesting for grinding out levels or items, but it's just so repetitive and dull, it's just not fun to do it. These little side missions should have been scrapped, and they should have just focused on making the main levels better. This feels like the kind of bullcrap that went on when I was talking about Fallout 4, where they were working on this irrelevant stuff like the settlement system, where they should have just been working on making the main game better, not this miscellany of extra crap at the end. This is a terrible waste of gameplay, of game design priorities on their part. The side missions are meh. It's just not all that fun. Although, having said that, compared to your average run-of-the-mill game, these games are much, much better. I love them more than the vast majority of action RPGs I play, which I found to be banal and uninteresting. These are much better. I enjoy them. It's just, again, it's like 40% there. And most of the time, though, it's not quite where it needs to be. The enemies were also a major disappointment in the game. Now, the ones that were in the game, they were enjoyable and they were fun to play against, but there were very, very few of them. In the Souls games, even the bad ones, you know that you were going to be facing new enemies at every level you went to. There's going to be new stuff going on in each individual area. In this game, after maybe 4 or 5 hours, you've encountered about 90% of all of the enemies in the game, especially if you've done the side missions. They are all freaking identical. It's ridiculous. Now there's the standard humanoid enemies, so guy with a sword, people that have all of the weapons that you have. There are ninja guys, there are guys that can shoot guns or shoot bows at you from far away. There are wizards, there are skeleton versions of these guys, which are a little bit more challenging. And then there are a couple of demons. There's a Cyclops demon, a basic Oni, and there's a Raven Tengu. That's about it. That's your enemy variety throughout virtually the entire game. There are a couple more that I'm making out here. This wheel thing is also pretty dangerous. They have so few enemies for a game that's going to be like 60 plus hours. It's crazy. It gets boring fighting against them. As they try to change things up a little bit as the game goes on, but it's very vague and very sparing what they're doing with this. They sort of kind of alter an enemy's moveset or change an enemy's attack. So they add like one extra attack, so it's the same enemy just with a little bit of difference there. But it's just not fun, or they make him vulnerable to different elemental attacks or something like that. But really, these minor little changes and differences are kind of boring and not really worthwhile. It's just so blasé fighting the same enemies over and over and over again. The same samurai, the same type of Oni that you fight just hordes of throughout the entire game. It's really dull, and it gets, maybe for the first 15-20 hours you're going to be okay, but after that it just becomes boring and repetitive. Now, the bosses in the game were not boring and repetitive. Some of them I absolutely loved, like this ogress woman was really cool that we had to fight. There was a giant frog boss who was really, really cool. He was my favorite boss in the game. However, the great majority of bosses in the game I found to be extremely challenging, like viciously, brutally challenging. Even the very first outside of the tutorial area, I guess, your first Japanese level boss is extremely difficult. And if I had not had 3 years of experience or 4 years of experience now playing Souls games, I would have given this up as impossible almost immediately. It would have been outrageous for me to even contemplate it. But the Souls games kind of trained me to understand how things go. But the bosses have so much health. All of the bosses have too much health. Every single one, even the good bosses, they all have too much health. That's something that people kind of forget about Demon Souls and Dark Souls, the first two games in the series. Those two games, especially Demon Souls, the enemies have very little health. You can actually rake away large amounts of them, very quickly. Now, they're still dangerous, they're still difficult, it's still hard to play these games, but for the most part, you can kill even an enemy boss very quickly. Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne are where it began, that these bosses have to have giant health bars, and it becomes this brutal endurance match just to try to beat them. That's a huge problem I have with this game. You can't get good at it. You have to get perfect at it. Perfect, fucking perfect, absolutely perfect. And if you are not willing to be perfect, and I mean absolutely, utterly, without flaw in this game, you can't beat these bosses. The chance of you getting, in the Souls games, even the ones I didn't care for, the vast majority of the time, if you screwed up, you were punished. It makes sense, right? You rolled when you should have blocked, you attacked when you should have rolled, you rolled in the wrong direction and you got hit instead of going over here, you didn't notice an enemy behind you when you were looking at an enemy in front of you and you got hit. It made sense. But in this game, especially in the boss fights, it's mistake, punish. You're punished multiple times for one mistake and can easily be destroyed in this combo very quickly. It happens so fast, and you have very little chance to react to it. It's crazy. You have to be absolutely pitch perfect, beyond the shadow of a doubt when you play these bosses, or you are going to be annihilated. And way too many of the bosses had something that the Souls games had very little of: one-shot deaths. You can get instantly killed with one hit, which is not in the spirit of the Souls games. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, it does, but it's rare. Most of the time, you make a mistake, you get punished, and you move on. In this game, you make a mistake, and you can be totally destroyed. Fighting these bosses, especially things like the Yuki Onna, fighting a couple of these humanoid bosses with these humanoid samurai bosses, they can be outrageously difficult, extremely tough, and it's just crazy. It's not worthwhile. In the Souls games, you get a feeling of satisfaction when you defeat a boss. In this game, you don't get that. You get a sense of exhaustion, and thank God that was over. This tiny little level with this boss that kicked my ass over and over and over again, 10 or 20 or 30 times until I finally managed to do it. It's not fun. It's just wearying and boring, and I really didn't care for it. And I think I could have loved these bosses if there was just a little bit of change to them, if they were just a little bit less crazy, ultra-fast, kill you in 1 or 2 hits bosses. I could have enjoyed them, instead of having to do them over and over and over and over and over again until I get perfect, not get good. Now, having said that, I did enjoy some of the bosses. Some of the bosses I did find were kind of easy, like the spider boss I thought was fairly trivial, and a couple of other ones I did pretty fast also. I don't want to say it felt unfair with the bosses, it was just too much of an endurance match, like I exhausted myself beyond a certain point. Playing the Souls games, and especially playing Nioh, you get a real sense of, strangely enough, of the First World War. When you read about all of these battles and how in the first 24 to 48 hours of these battles that went on for weeks and weeks, anyone from any side of the battle who was fighting was in absolutely tip-top shape when they were attacking in those first 2 days. But after that, attacking the same place again and again for weeks, you are nowhere near your initial capability in that fighting. Your morale is gone, your capacity is gone, and fighting these bosses is just enough to make me salty and angry. I hated going up against these bosses again and again and again and again, and I would usually go in there the first time and just smash through the boss, getting them down maybe to a third or half health in my first attempt, and then die, and then the next 10 attempts, because after that first one I was kind of exhausted, and I would just get annihilated. And I would sometimes get annihilated by the fact that these bosses seem to almost universally have different phases. And unlike in some of the Souls games where they have clearly defined points between phases, if you hit an enemy's certain health level, they'll start to vary their attacks on the boss fights especially. So a boss at half health might throw in an extra different attack. So that means you not only have to learn the the first 50% of the boss fight, you have to learn the next 50% of the boss fight, which is totally different, and you have to defeat the first 50% of the boss's health in order to get to that boss fight. So you may go in there 10 or 15 times just to learn the original boss fight mechanics, and then you have to learn another 10 or 15 times to get the second one down, all the while every single time perfectly getting the first one down just to get to 50% health. It's maddening. It's crazy. I can't believe they thought this was a good idea. I hated it. I still enjoyed a fair amount of it. I still have to come out and say, I enjoyed playing this game, even though I got so angry at it so many times. If they just tweak this game in just fairly small ways during the next playthrough, if they make a sequel to this game or a spiritual successor, you can have a real masterpiece on your hand. The setting of the game in feudal Japan is really cool because if there's one thing the Souls games can't scratch, it's East Asian combat. There are some, but perilously few, pieces of East Asian armor and weaponry in the Souls series. There's one here, one there, there's a couple katanas, but especially the armor is sort of non-existent, except for maybe one or two sets here and there. In this game, of course, it's all Japanese armor, and it looks amazing. There are big samurai, you could cosplay as Toshiro Mifune, you could have all sorts of big samurai armor and ninja armor and mage armor and all kinds of stuff, and just live out your samurai fantasies. And you're going to look absolutely amazing doing it. If, that is, you can figure out the painfully ridiculous and insane weapons and equipment systems. Not system, systems. This system and the equipment screen is crazy. It is way, way, way too busy, way too complicated. There's way too much stuff here that is difficult to make sense of. And I understand that we should, you have to take a little bit of time to learn how to do things, especially in the modern era where the internet exists and you can instantly learn how to have the best equipment and how it works and how to forge things and do that on the wiki and so forth, or watch YouTube videos. But it is incredibly complicated going into that naked and just not fun. Not only are you going to be trying to soul match your items, which means you take an item that's like level 50 and try to upgrade it to level 100, but you also have to worry about what items do, what their special properties are, what toughness means, if you want extra ki or extra life. There are so many different things, and they're so complicated and so confusing. It really doesn't mean anything, ultimately, and it doesn't seem to have all that much of an effect on the gameplay. I mean, a little bit, but it's very confusing to figure out how to do any of this stuff. And especially with your weapons, you can upgrade them, but the game drops weapons like they're candy all the time. Even a side mission, a fairly small one, you're likely to come away with at least a dozen or so weapons just from killing the enemies. You drop a pile of them every time that they die. And armor as well, and it's just so confusing and impossible to keep track of them. And it also just doesn't seem like things just don't make sense in the system. Like, I would like to look at, and when I'm equipping something, all of my spears all in line. But where is that? I don't know where that is. There's a level, recently got weapons. It's all scattered around. It doesn't make any sense. It's difficult to navigate. It's like a maze. It's system upon system upon system, all mixed up in here. And it's difficult to soul match everything because it costs huge amounts of gold to do that, and you're likely not to have it, especially if you want to upgrade a weapon or two and some ranged weapons and all 5 pieces of your armor. It's nuts. I do like what the armor looks like and what the weapons look like, but all of this stuff about upgrading it is insane. I mean, it was pretty insane in the original Demon Souls too, but this is just crazy. I just despised this, and I was really annoyed by it. Speaking of systems upon systems, there's also a weird level up system here where you have to gain some of your skills. And I say weird because you should really have these skills from the very start of the game. Like, there's this one skill you can get where you do a combo, and at the end of it you kick an enemy to hurt their stamina. But it's really confusing that that's not just a base part of the game. You have to unlock it. And you unlock it so quickly it barely means anything. Like, why should it just be there from the start? You also have to unlock backstabs, which is really annoying if you weren't looking through the ninjutsu section here, the skills, and realizing, hey, I need to upgrade my skills here. But if you weren't playing as a ninja, you may have not even looked at that and thought, well, I'm not going to do that for this playthrough because I'm using a heavy strength-based character. I'm not going to get this. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And you also have another system called your title system where you can go in there and get some extra stuff going on. Everything is so maddening and crazy, and trying to figure it out is really confusing and really difficult. And in order to unlock certain levels of it, you have to go back to the dojo and do extra training missions that will unlock periodically if you pay attention to it, which I didn't. And so for a long time I didn't have these extra skills because I didn't understand what I was supposed to do. The whole thing is a labyrinth that you have to navigate. It is absolutely insane, and that needed to change. It was utterly crazy. Now, going to the story of the game, I split the story of a game up into two sections. There is the milieu, where the setting, and then there's the actions of the characters and the plot of the story. That's two separate parts. In terms of the milieu and the atmosphere, it's not bad. It looks okay. The demons aren't really frightening or scary. They're just sort of silly, sort of kabuki mask type looking things, or traditional Japanese oni or cyclopses. It's not incredible. It's sort of all right. The look of the world is very good. It's a good looking game. There's all sorts of Japanese pagodas, but that's it. You have just the medieval Japanese setting. That's it. You don't have anything else. Unlike in the Souls game where you can go to all kinds of wild different places, especially in Demon Souls. Here, this is all you got. And it's okay, it's passable. Something that is totally irrelevant to this is the story of the game. Bizarrely start out as a foreigner, you're a Westerner for some reason, even though this game was made in Japan. I did like how they called him Anjin, like the main Richard Chamberlain's character from James Clavell's Shogun adaptation. That was kind of neat. Yeah, the story is almost non-existent. It's very Onimusha-like, or like those games based in the setting of that are based in China's Warring States period, or the Romance of the Three Kingdoms period, where they take historical events and add sort of fantasy and fiction to it. It's so boring I could barely pay attention to it. It was a nuisance and unnecessary. And you should have been able to make your own character, and you should have just been a Japanese man or woman. There's no need to make this guy look like Geralt of Rivia for some reason. So I've already made this way too long, so I'm going to wrap up my thoughts about this. I did enjoy myself playing Nioh. I had fun. I liked what I was doing. I liked aspects of it. I don't think I've ever gone into a game wanting to like it more than this. Ever in my entire life have I wanted to like a game more than I wanted to like Nioh. And I don't know how I feel about it entirely, which is why I wanted to get this out. I enjoyed parts of it, I loved parts of it, and I ferociously hated other parts of it, like to the point of wanting to never play the game again. It enraged me so much to be fighting a boss and carefully, precisely doing things for so long, and then having that damn stamina thing snap into place. I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything, and then I was just annihilated by a boss. That needs to go for me. That is so enraging, that is so frustrating. But the other parts of the combat, because it's so Souls-esque, were really addictive and fun. It was like doing a drug that kind of hurts you and you feel bad after you do it, but while you're doing it, it's just so amazing, the first 20-30 minutes of the drug are incredible, but then you get this awful headache, and you get a little nauseous. And there were a bunch of little nuisances in the game, aside from the level up system, the item system, getting so many items, not knowing what to do with all of these damn items. It's crazy. I still like it because it's so Souls-esque, it's Souls-esque or Diablo-esque in that you die and you have to recover a bloodstain essentially to get your experience points back. Diablo didn't do that, but you still had to go and recover your body with your items and your gold and so forth on it if you died. You had one chance to get it back, that kind of system. So I enjoy that. I think it's wonderful. But even that system is kind of annoying too, because when you die, your bloodstain remains out in the world. And then, if you run out into the world and die before you get to your bloodstain, you don't get a new bloodstain. Like, let's say you had 1,000 souls, and you die. In the Souls games, you can just run, and if you killed a bunch of people along the way towards your bloodstain and you got 500 souls, and you died before retrieving the original bloodstain, you'd be able to go back to a new bloodstain with that 500 souls and go, okay, I'm going to get this. In this game, if you die on the way to that bloodstain, any and all experience points that you were collecting gone. It's gone forever. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. You should provoke a new bloodstain. But that's not the way this game was structured. It's just this extra little bit of irritation added to everything, you know? I love, and that's pretty much this game. I love that they have this bloodstain system, but the way they do it is kind of obnoxious and irritating. I love the combat system with the different stances, but I hate the fact that you have the stamina punishment system that's really irritating. I haven't decided whether I'm going to get the DLC for this game or not. I think that I probably will go get it, because I have enjoyed myself more than I've hated myself and wanted everything in the world to die forever. But the rage level was so high, so much higher than it should have been, I think, for this game, that I can't really give it a full recommendation. You know, especially if you're a Souls fanatic, because it's not a Souls game. It's heavily influenced by it, but it's its own thing, and it's not quite there. But I am also really hopeful for the game, and I want there to be more Nioh type games. I want the standard action RPG to be held to the level of the Souls games, and to have their own thing, branch off in their own way. I don't necessarily want, even though I talk about it all the time, for a game to be identical to Souls. But this game, and this game wasn't, but it could have done a couple of things better, you know, made it a Metroidvania-style game. Is it a lot harder to do? Of course it is, but you have to spend time if you want to make a good game. And you have to get rid of all of this extraneous dross around the game. You have to simplify and codify the item and equipment system. You have to make sure you don't have to farm health items like in Bloodborne and Demon Souls, which you do in this game, which is freaking crazy. I hated that. That is such an obvious thing that you shouldn't do. To force you to go out and farm these items. It was absolutely crazy. Thank God, by sheer chance, I got like 70 or 80 healing items in this one area because I was dying to the boss over and over again and almost quit the game because of how difficult he was. But I'm lucky I did that just a couple levels before the final level, where I would have been at the final boss of the game with no ability to fight them. It would have just been too difficult. But anyway, I'm sorry for taking up all this time, but I wanted to get my thoughts out on this game because I enjoyed it, I had a lot of fun, but I also had a lot of misery involved in it. Please subscribe to this channel if you want to see more of my content. I linked some more videos here for you to take a look at. Please tell me in the comments if you've played Nioh, what you thought of it, and what you thought of my opinion, why my opinion is right, why my opinion is wrong, what your opinion of it, if I was somewhere in between. And tell me if you plan on getting the game, and what you expect out of it. Tell me if you like the Souls games. I want to know in the comments below. Thank you very much, and have a good day.